Now those study guides that I handed out, they are for you to go home and to do a little research on that particular topic. Okay? And the best way to do that is to buy you one or two commentaries and look up the verses, and guess what you have to do? Read the commentaries. Buying the commentaries ain't going to do much. Okay? If you're not going to read them, just don't buy them because you're wasting $25 or $30. So don't do that. Okay? Revelation chapter 6. Pretty interesting so far, is it not? We came to chapter 4 and we see the throne room of God. Chapter 5, God has a book in His hand, right? Just one problem. The book is sealed with 7 seals, is it not? And there is no man worthy to open the book, and John weeps, doesn't he? But there is hope, isn't there? Why? Why is there hope? Yes, they did find someone worthy. And that someone worthy is described as the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of Jesse, and also what? A lamb that was slain. A lamb that was slain. So John turns and he sees this lamb that was slain. The lamb goes up to the throne of God and he takes the book and enter into chapter 6. And what happens? He starts opening the what? Opening the seals. Okay? And the first 4 seals reveal to us what some refer to as the 4 blank. Yes, the 4 horsemen of Revelation. The 4 horsemen of Revelation. And what's interesting about these first 4 seals is that each time a seal is opened, one of the 4 beasts cries out and says, "Come and see." And then John tells us what he sees, okay, relative to these 4 horses. What color is the first horse? White, yes. And that white is a symbol of purity and victory. Namely, victory in this context, okay? Now there's a rider that is sitting on this white horse, and what is he wearing? Yes, he is wearing a crown. Is he carrying anything with him? Yes, he's carrying with him a bow, a symbol of war and of fighting, right? He's not going out to hunt anything because the Bible says that he went forth to conquer, did he not? And so immediately John tells us the end of the story, doesn't he? What's the end of the story? Victory. God's people, Jesus Christ, win the battle. Okay, so that's horse number 1. But then all of a sudden the second seal is open. A second horse comes out, and what color is he? Red. Indicating blood, right? Fiery red, indicating bloodshed. Persecution, right? Calamity, problems, struggles, difficulty, and even death, possibly. Okay? There is a rider on a red horse, is there not? And what does he have in his hand? Yes, he has a, there you go, great sword. Don't leave out the adjectives. Okay? I carry a knife, or I could carry a great knife, couldn't I? Okay? And my knife might be just a little pocket knife. My great knife might be a machete on the other side. Okay? So there is a difference between the two. He has a great sword. And what is his responsibility? What is he going out to do? Oh yes, to take peace from the earth. Okay, so his job is to destroy any peace that exists on the earth. All right, and then we get last week to the third horse, and the third horse was who? A black horse. Yes, a black horse, indicating what? Mourning, grief. Okay, we used to when we went to funerals. What did we wear? We wore black as a symbol of mourning. Okay, if you ever saw a couple get married in black, it started off pretty bad. Okay. Wouldn't it? I mean, that'd be pretty bad. Barnes makes this statement, okay? Black, in the Scriptures, is the image of fear, of famine, of death. Lamentations 5:10. Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. Jeremiah 14:2. Because of the drought Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish. They are in deep mourning. Literally in the Hebrew, it says they were in deep black for the land. Joel 2:6. All faces shall gather blackness. Nahum 2:10. The knees smite together, and there is great pain in all loins, and the faces of them all gather blackness. Can you see in the face of a person when they are distraught and when they are hurting and agonizing? You can see it, can't you? All over their face. It was interesting. My dad, he had COPD and some other issues as well. And the last 2 years of his life, he just breathed through oxygen. And the last year of his life, he just went from the bed to the dining room table and from the bed to the bathroom. That was his whole life for the last year. And you could see on my dad's face how hard and how difficult life was for him. And when my dad finally died and we go to the funeral, I wasn't there when he passed away. So first time I saw him was when I went into the visitation. Their dad was in the casket. My dad looked 20 years younger than the last time I had seen him. And the reason is because all the stress, all the difficulty that he'd been experiencing was gone. Okay, and I was shocked to see Dad look the way he did. And, I don't like that term, but we walk by and say, ooh, doesn't he look good? I don't know. Somebody says, yeah, for a dead guy, he looks great. Kind of rough. But this idea of a black horse, he brings mourning and distress to the lives of individuals. Now, this horseman too, he's carrying something. What is he carrying? Yes, the Bible says this. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. Question: what are balances for? What's their purpose? Yeah, it's for weighing, is it not? Okay, you get so much food on one side and you pay so much money on the other side, right? And the balances are supposed to be properly weighed, right? So that you don't get jacked around by the person who's selling you the goods. And so if you agree to a certain price, you get so much food, right? So that's what this is indicating, this process of weighing and measuring. Now, the things that they are going to weigh and the things that they are going to measure are grains. Let me ask you something. When you go to buy grain, do you normally buy grain by means of a balance? No? You don't buy it by a balance? How do you buy grain usually? Yeah, you buy it by a bag full, do you not? Okay? You buy a bag of wheat. You buy a bag of rice. You buy a bag of barley. And it can be 10, 15, 20, 30 pounds, right? Not this time, guys. They are now buying this grain by the process of weights and balances, indicating what? Scarcity of food. Folks, anytime war, anytime persecution comes upon a group of individuals, guess what? Famine is a part of the process, okay? And so the thing that causes the blackness and the darkness upon the face of the people is that there is a famine that is going to be part of this particular process, okay? We've been blessed in the United States, have we not? There has never, and I can capitalize that, underline it, highlight it, there has never been a time when Victor Eskew has suffered famine. You know that? Now, I've been hungry a couple of times, but that doesn't count. You know, just because you skipped a meal and you're hungry. You got sick and you're finally getting well and you feel like you're about to starve to death. Okay? Some people can't go 2 hours without starving to death. Okay? But we're very blessed in the United States, aren't we? You want something, guess what? You can go get as much of it as you want on the shelves and you can stay full all the time. Folks, when times get hard and difficult, that's not the case, okay? Now, John says this. This is our 10th point. And I heard the voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for what? For a penny. Okay? So now we know what? The cost, don't we? We know the cost of the wheat and we know the cost of the barley. Both of them cost how much? A penny. So here you are, you go up to the man who's selling wheat and barley and you say, I want a measure of wheat. So you put your penny on the balances and he measures out what? 1 measure of wheat to you. Okay? And then he takes that, he pours it out, bundles it up, hands you your little bag, and off you go. That's what you get for your penny, right? Well, you don't want just a measure, okay? You need a little bit more than that. So you say, well, rather than getting the good stuff, that's the what? The wheat. I'm going to get the worser stuff, okay? The not as good stuff, so I think I'll buy the what? I'll buy the barley. Doesn't make as good a bread. It's not as tasty. A little drier. My kids don't like it nearly as much. Okay? But guess what? I get 3 measures for what? The same penny. Let me ask you something. Does the amount of money you have ever determine what you buy? Yeah. Really? None of us are rich enough just to buy whatever we want anytime we want? Okay? My brother the other day, he looked up some guy that's a billionaire. I think he's got one of the richest guys. And he told me, he said, Vic, if this man wanted to spend all he has, okay, he would have to spend $13 million per day for the next 40 years to spend it all. Now, can you imagine that? You know, wake up today and you got $13 million just to blow. You couldn't blow $13 million today, hardly. Now, you might go buy a house or something, on the ocean or something, but, that's unbelievable, isn't it? Most of us don't have that. But folks, when times get tough, then we really have to what? Start counting pennies. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. 1 penny, are you listening? A day's wages. Okay? 1 penny, a day's wages. Now listen to me. 1 measure of wheat, rations for 1 person for a day. Got it? So I'm going to work a full day. Now back then, they didn't have unions and all these other things. When they said a day's work, guess what that meant most of the time? Sun up till sundown. Okay? 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. 12, 13-hour days. And then you would get your what? You would get your penny. After a day's work, guess what I am? I'm hungry. I run down to the market and I get 1 measure of what? Wheat. That's just enough for me for a day. But there's a problem. I don't have just me at the house. I have a wife, and I've got 6 kids. Folks, the Jews, it wasn't, 2 kids or a kid and a half, No, it's 6, 7, 8 kids. If you don't believe that, read the genealogies, okay? Those guys had numerous kids, didn't they? Okay? And so here you are, you've worked a whole day, and all you can buy is what? 1 measure of wheat. And it's got to serve who? Your entire family. So now I say, no, I'm not going to buy the wheat. I'm going to buy the what? I'm going to buy the barley. Because at least that way I get what? 3 measures, and we get a little bit more until tomorrow. And maybe we can what? Survive. And guess what a dad usually does? You give to the kids, you give to the wife first, don't you, folks? The whole point is of these weights and balances and this cry out, a penny for a measure of wheat, a penny for 3 measures of barley, is to indicate scarcity of food and the exorbitant prices that are going to be there when this famine enters into the land. Jim? Yep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was hard times, wasn't it? You know, anytime you're in war, anytime there's the loss of goods, then the prices go up and there's less to partake of. And so all John is predicting in the Revelation, all that is being revealed in this seal, is that when this persecution comes, when this red horse enters onto the scene, there's going to be a time of famine and of deep grief among the people. Larry?
Isn't that the way the Romans conquered Jerusalem? They surrounded it and starved them out.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was a severe battle, and they did everything they could do to find the conduit so they could cut off the water supply as well. You know, and so there wasn't much there. In Matthew 24, verse 7, Jesus is talking about the fall of Jerusalem. And here's what He says. And there shall be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in divers places. Okay, so he talks about the fact that when the fall of Jerusalem comes, guess what's going to be part of the problem? Famine in the land. Okay? Now, right at the end of verse 6, there's an interesting statement that's made, though. Okay? And it's point number 11 in the study notes. Hurt not the what? Oil and wine. Wow. Hurt not the oil and wine. Here's the question first. Who's talking? Who said that? Don't hurt the oil and wine. Okay? You've got this horse going out, right? And he's creating this famine in the land. And yet, there's a cry that says, don't you dare hurt the what? The oil and wine. Folks, who is that? It's God. God is doing what? God is directing the rider on the black horse. Okay? Oh yes, you can bring famine on the land, and there can be a shortage of wheat, there can be a shortage of barley, but guess what I don't want you to do? Don't you dare touch what? The oil and the wine. Okay? Now, tells us a couple of things. Number one, who's always in charge? Always. God's always in charge. Okay? Even though bad times happen, even though bad things come upon us, back behind the scenes, guess who is directing what is transpiring? God is, folks. And you and I need to remember that. You see, what happens is we get discouraged, don't we? It's bad. It's hard. It's difficult. I'm starving. My wife's starving. My kids are starving. There's death all around us. There's persecution that's going on in the land. And what do I want to do? I want to give up. I start asking, where's God? Well, guess what? God is crying out, don't hurt the what? The wine and the oil. Are both of those products important in a household? Yeah. Folks, if you don't have oil, then guess what? You can't cook. Got no lighting in the house. Okay? There's no... Oil oftentimes was used for medicinal purposes. Okay? So God is keeping some vital things in the house. Question. In Israel, was water, good water, hard to find? Oh yeah. Very, very difficult to find. So guess how they sustain themselves as far as liquid is concerned? Wine. Okay? Now, the word wine, you have to keep the word wine in its context, okay? Greek word oinos, it can be fertilized alcohol, alcoholic wine. It can be, guess what? It can be the grape and the juice that is in the grape while still on the vine, okay? Were there ways to keep grape juice from fermenting in the first century? Yes. One of the things you don't want grape juice to do is get hot, right? So guess one way to cool down the grape juice. Put it in a bag, drop it down into a well, and guess what? It's cool down there. As long as it stays down there, it won't what? Ferment. You can boil it until it becomes a what? Kind of a paste. And once it becomes that paste, you can store that and then you can use it as needed, add water, and guess what? It never ferments. They had numerous ways of keeping wine, keeping grape juice from fermenting, okay? So just because he says don't hurt the wine doesn't mean that he's talking about alcoholic wine. He may just be talking about what? Grape juice. Just grape juice. Don't hurt the predominant juice that is drunk around the table, okay? And there's a lot of good in the grape as well. A couple of interesting things. These two products were natural, weren't they? And they were seasonal, weren't they? Natural and seasonal. And so God has control of those products, doesn't He? Okay? And so guess what He says? Don't touch the oil and wine. He still provides benefits even when? Even in times of hardship and difficulty. All right? Sometimes what we have a tendency to do is we have a tendency to take our eyes off the blessings of God and only look at what? The bad stuff that's going on, right? And here, do they still have some good things? Yes, we still have our what? Our oil and our wine. Wallace says this. This is the symbol of the providential alleviation of suffering and mitigation of sorrow. With oil and wine, He would bind up their wounds. Wow. Folks, God is still where? Behind the scenes, isn't He? Don't ever forget that. In the worst troubles, in the worst difficulties, in the worst problems in our lives, God is what? God is still working the process. Beautiful, beautiful, ending of that passage. Questions, comments? Anybody? Yes, ma'am. Well, remember, this is what color horse? The black horse. He brings grief through what? Famine. Okay? So, how do you bring famine on land? You destroy the what? The food supply. You destroy the drink supply. Okay? So, God is going to allow there to be some famine, but He's not going to let everything be destroyed. Okay? The oil and the wine, guess what you can't do? Can't touch it. Okay? It's similar to what was going on with Job and Satan. Remember? Satan said to, you remove all these blessings from Job and guess what? He'll curse you. And what does God say? Fine, afflict him, but what? Don't you dare touch him. So He took everything that he had. See, God is what? Folks, God is always behind the scenes. God is always directing the affairs that are going on in the world. Okay? God is what? We use this little word all the time. Sovereign. What does that word mean? God is sovereign. Yes, He is over all. He is ruler of ruler. He is in absolute, total control. And sometimes we forget that. So even though there's going to be famine and hardship, the writer is letting us know that God's still what? He's still in control, and He's still there. Sometimes we just have to look for Him, don't we?
So if this is God talking, who's He addressing the Satan?
He's the rider on the black horse who has the weights and balances, who's bringing the famine. Okay? It would be Satan and Satan's allies. They're the ones who are behind all of this. Okay? And anyone else that Satan is using. Okay? The Jews, the Romans. Okay? Any of those individuals that would be used. All right? So the 3 seals have been opened. The 4th seal gets open, and all of a sudden John hears again, "Come and see." And what does he see this time? "And I looked and beheld a pale horse." Wow. When individuals get very, very, very sick, they get what? Pale. Right? Sometimes we use some other words to describe them, don't we? "Ooh, his skin sure does look..." Huh? Pasty. That's nasty, isn't it? Sometimes we say, "He looks a little ashy." Right? Skin looks what color? Kind of a gray look to it. Okay? One man said, "Pale involves the lack of usual intensity of color. It is like the light has been turned off in the skin." That's about right, isn't it? Yes, ma'am.
It could be from shock.
Oh, yes, shock can do it. It sure can. Okay? In this case, it's because the times are so hard and so difficult. Okay? And we'll see that in just a minute. Okay? Notice the next point, 13. "And his name that sat on him was" what? Death. Folks, the pale horse is who? Death. So what is John announcing? John's announcing what's about to come. He begins with what? Victory. Don't forget that. You're going to win. But before victory, there's going to be what? Persecution and bloodshed. There's going to be famine and grief. And there's going to be what? Death that's going to be experienced. He's warning all these individuals about what's going to transpire. Okay? His name is death. Death is usually the result of wars and famine. Now, here's something that's interesting. This rider does not carry any symbols with him. No crown, no bow, no great sword, no balances. It's just who? It's just death. Okay? I thought this was interesting. Death does not need to carry any emblems. Death is enough. Isn't it? Well, what does he need? You know, death doesn't need an emblem to describe him. Death alone is enough. Now here's what's interesting. Death uses the previous 2 horses to accomplish his mission of death, doesn't he? Okay? He uses what? Bloodshed, persecution, trauma, calamity. And he also brings what? Famine. Are there many individuals who just don't survive famines? A bunch of people don't survive famines. And it's amazing the lengths to which individuals will go in order to survive, right? Even do what? In the destruction of Jerusalem, when the Babylonian armies came upon that city, guess what the mothers did? Ate their babies to survive. I would never do that. You've never been that hungry. Isn't that amazing? To think you could kill your own child to eat just to what? Just to survive? Be tough, wouldn't it? Now notice the next point. You got this rider. His name is Death. And notice what the text says. And what? Hell followed him. Ooh-wee. Now, there's no mention of how he is being transported. Okay? It just says what? Hell follows him. Now, when you look up the Greek word for hell here, it is not Gehenna. What does the word Gehenna mean? There's 3 words in the New Testament that are translated hell. Okay? One of them is Gehenna. The main person who uses that word is Jesus. In fact, it's only used once or twice in other places other than Jesus using it. What is Gehenna? Nobody know? Yeah, it's hellfire, folks. It is final, ultimate condemnation. Okay? Then there is another word that is used one time, and it's used by Peter, and it's Tartaru. We usually call it Tartarus. Okay? That word is translated hell in 2 Peter 2 verse 4. And there's one other word, I just wrote about it not long ago in the bulletin. Hades. Okay, we did a word study of every time it's used in the New Testament, Hades. Okay, and that's the word that is used here. Okay, it's not Gehenna, not eternal condemnation. It says, who's following these individuals? Death and Hades. What is Hades? The unseen, what? Yes, the unseen realm of the dead. Turn over in your Bibles to Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16. Some call this a parable. Some say it ain't. I don't believe it is. We can talk about that later. Okay? But it is the account of the rich man and Lazarus, isn't it? Have two men. One's wealthy, fares sumptuously every day, clothed in purple and fine linen, lives a beautiful life, does he not? And there's another man by the name of Lazarus who is a beggar. He lays at the gate of the rich man, begging for food, and the Bible says, moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. Can you imagine you got a sore so bad on you that it feels good for a dog to lick it? It's kind of gross, isn't it? And it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into where? Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments. The word hell there is what? Hades. In Hades. Now, if you continue to read the story, you find that there is a great gulf that is fixed between the place where Lazarus is and where the rich man is. Okay? One is called Abraham's bosom. The other one is called what? Torments. Okay? And between the two is what? A great gulf. And you cannot what? You can't pass between the two. Folks, when you and I close our eyes in death, you're either going to torments or you are going where? To Abraham's bosom. Now, both of those places are hell. Both of those places are a part of Hades. Both of those places are the unseen realm of who? Of the dead. Just two compartments in that Hadean realm. So here we've got death. Death has been sent out on the pale horse, right? And who's following right behind him? Hades. Death will consume the body. Hades will consume the what? The soul of mankind. Ooh-wee. The two work together. Death claiming the body, Hades claiming the soul. So it's not surprising. And in Revelation we see this connection. Death and hell. Death and hell. Several times stated in the context. Okay? Because the minute you die, what happens? The soul enters into the Hadean realm. Okay? I find it interesting when Jesus is talking, Matthew 16 verse 18, and He says this, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. It's not Gehenna. It's what? Hades. The gates of Hades shall not prevail against the church. Okay? What did Jesus know? Jesus knew in just a few months, I'm going to be what? I'm going to be killed. Right? And on the cross of Calvary, once the penitent thief made his confession on that cross, what did Jesus say to him? Today thou shalt be with me in paradise. Jesus knew, I'm going to the unseen realm of the dead. I'm going to Hades. I'm going where? I'm going to paradise when I die. But guess what? The gates of Hades, the gates of the unseen realm of the dead, cannot what? Cannot prevail against me. Guess what, folks? The Hadean realm couldn't keep Jesus, could it? 3 days later, what did Jesus do? Some preachers say this: He burst forth from the bars of the Hadean realm, didn't He, in the resurrection? The gates of hell, the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. Folks, Jesus died. If He hadn't come forth from the grave, there'd be no church. But you see, the gates of hell, Hades, can't prevail against it. So He came forth victorious over death and established the church. Now notice this next one. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth. Uh-oh. What do we see again? Limitation. Right? Do you hear what the Word said? And power was what? Given to them. To who? Death and hell. Over what? A fourth part of the earth. Folks, who's always in control? God's always in control. Okay? Brother Wallace makes this suggestion. I think it's interesting. Well, before I get there, in other places in Revelation, you're going to read about different fractions. Okay? Here we read about what? A fourth part. You're going to read about a tenth. You're going to read about a third. And Brother Wallace makes this suggestion. Apparently intended as proportionate figures of the vast destruction, but without geographical or mathematical significance. Okay? When you hear the word a fourth, does a picture come to your mind? Yeah. Yeah. Mike's thinking like I am. That may be dangerous for Mike. Okay? But yeah, you take a pie, you cut it into a fourth, right? I mean, you draw two lines, cut it into fourths, and you think of one of those as what? 1/4 of the pie, right? And so it gives you some indication about what? The vastness of what? The destruction that's going to come. A fourth part. But guess what? It also tells me what? 3/4 what? Aren't going to be harmed, aren't going to suffer death and the Hadean realm. So it's not really trying to give us an exact number of people. How many is that of the fourth? He's just trying to give us what? A picture of what? Kind of the amount of the devastation that's going to come. Is it going to be bad? Yes. If a fourth part of the United States of America died, would that be bad? Oh man. It would be a huge number of people. But guess what? We would still have what? 3/4, which is even bigger. Okay? So even though we may not attach a number to it, he's trying to get us to understand how big the devastation is going to be. Okay? By using these different fractions and things of that nature. So we've gone through the riders of the 4 horses, and he then opens up a 5th seal, and everything changes, doesn't it? No more what? No more horses and no more beasts crying out, "Come and see." Okay? The whole picture changes. And when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they had. Man, the bell has rung. And guess what we can't do? We can't talk about that tonight. Let me put it this way. I ain't talking about it tonight. And the reason is because I want you to do what? Come back next week. That's right. You got to keep this like a soap opera. Okay? It's going to get gooder. We'll have a pretty good discussion on those souls under the altar, folks. It's interesting. Okay? Thank you.